So welcome to the podcast, She Who Believes. I am your host, Vivian Bell, and I am indeed She Who Believes. So as you can see, I'm in my car again this week, but this time you guys get to get a little video. And if you're watching on Spotify or YouTube, you are able to see our statistics and just see our thank yous for this actual week and the last 7 days where people were watching and listening. But if you're only listening in, you didn't get to see it. So jump over on YouTube and follow us, or go over to Spotify and follow us. And each time we schedule a podcast or it gets released, you'll get notified and it'll pop up on your phone, and you won't even have to search for it. So anyway, the title of today's podcast is It Matters. So it matters. Whatever the it is, it matters. Whether it is what you've been called to do, what you think about matters, what you listen to matters, who you surround and give access to you matters. Every single thing matters. It matters so much that we have actually rebranded Coaching by Vivian, and it is now Minding What Matters. And so if you go over to mindingwhatmattersnow.com, you can subscribe there. We've got a blog there. It has a list of all of our new programs, which we have been really working very hard to get rolled out. I know we've been pretty quiet on social. We have not posted as much and that kind of thing. And although we've had mindful moments and we have been consistent with those videos, we want you to know you're going to see more things like that. So I'm really excited about all that God is doing in this season, and just very, very excited to just help you guys walk through, focus on, and direct your attention to the things that actually matter. Because when we are minding what matters, we are walking in our purpose undisturbed, focused, without any heaviness, and not that things will not come and situations will not happen in our lives, but when we are focused, like those distractions are in the background, they are not as loud. The voice of the distractions are not as loud, whether it's a person, whether it's a habit. Say for instance, if you're a person who may start a project and not finish the project, although that can happen. Sometimes I've started projects and God has given me a download, and I'll do the framework of it, and then he'll pause. And I'm learning even more to trust his pause just as much as I trust his download, because if he gave it to me, he's not going to just snatch it back. He's saying, hey, I'm giving this to you. I'm downloading this in your spirit. So when I say yes to him and I start planning for it and I build a framework according to what he's speaking to me, I'm learning to trust God yet the more, because he's given it to me. So I showed him by faith that I believe him. And now his pause is not a denial. His pause is I gave this to you. You said yes. And now in the perfect timing, the appointed time, you will be ready for this particular thing. For example, minding what matters is actually something that God gave me almost 4 years ago. I believed him. I was up really early in the morning. He gave me a download and I created the logo. I actually have, this is the logo that you guys will see that will soon have its trademark. It was actually probably the third or fourth logo. So God gave me Minding What Matters, and then he'd give it to me. I'd put it to the side, or I felt to take my hands off of it. Then I'd get another vision about it. And then I'd change the logo again. And then finally we got to this logo where it was like, okay, this is the logo. This is what the end result is. Sometimes we get caught up because we want something to be perfect the first time, right? We want it to be exactly the way we think it should be, but sometimes it's just let me see if you're going to obey. Let me see if this is what you're going to do. And then also too, are you going to trust me fully throughout the process? Are you going to snatch this download and jump on it and do it all in your own strength and act like, it wasn't God ordained, or that you don't need my anointing to get it done? And again, God is not a person who plays games with us, but he wants us to always remain in a relationship with him. He wants us to recognize that without him, we can do nothing. But with him, all things are possible. So if God has given you a vision, a dream, it matters to God. It doesn't matter that it felt like it took 4 years or 20 years or 15 years or 50 years. If God gave it to you, then that means he trusts you enough to give it to you. So trust him enough to do what he says when he tells you to do it at the time he tells you to do it. Now, have I done that perfectly? No, I wish I could tell you that I did. I would be lying to you. And since I don't like to lie, and I don't practice lying, I'm going to be honest with you, because the truth sets us free, right? Sometimes it takes you out first, but it sets you free. So know that whatever your it is, it matters to somebody. What I know is this, is that minding what matters in these programs that God has given me and that I've said yes to, and that he's continued to develop just bit by bit throughout the years as God has sent me back to prepare for these programs that are rolling out at the beginning of next month. He showed me all along the way. He'd say, go back and look in this book, go back and look in this journal, go back and look here. And I literally didn't even realize how all along the way where I felt like, hey, God was giving me this and now he's pulling this back, or maybe he's having me pause. He lined everything up so smoothly. So now in this season, as he sends me back to go take a look at these things, the infrastructure was already there, and all of these things are just lining up completely perfectly. And then now he's adding to it, and he's compiling things onto it, and then he's adding other things. So literally, I'm watching God piece all these little things together that felt little to me, that felt like, God, you're not letting me complete anything. Like, I want to get this out here. And sometimes it was in a place of like desperation, being honest. I want this has to succeed. I need this to succeed. And sometimes it's like, hey, dude, I know you see my bank account. Like, I need this to succeed for real. But God is saying, trust me, trust my time, and I've appointed a time for all of this. And so I can look back and just see different things. And at one point I got a little discouraged, and just being honest about it, because God, I believed him for certain things. He actually had already sent me into schools a couple years ago to speak to a group of students and to encourage them. And so even though this was a private school, I was told I could not say the word God, Jesus, or Christ. And but the thing about that, though, I was not moved by that, because God had prepared me years, over almost 30 years ago. I was in high school, and I was asked to pray over future business leaders of America. One of our meetings, I was the chapter president and the district vice president. And I remember saying to my dad, I said, Dad, they've asked me to pray, and they said I can't say God, Jesus, or and I have to write my prayer down. And I had been taught, and I had heard people preach and say, if you write a prayer down, you're repeating the prayer, you're saying it, then you're not honoring God. And I heard all these misconceptions and these lies and things that were just not true. And maybe they didn't intend to lie, but it was just what they had believed. And my father, who I thought would tell me to say no, he said, no, you need to tell your teacher yes. When you go back to school tomorrow, tell your teacher you're going to do this. And I was like, what? He said, because God knows exactly who you're praying to. And so I sat with my father and we prayed. And then after I prayed, God had given me the words to say. I gave it to my father, and he's like, you did a great job. Send it into your teacher. He looked over it, proofread it, and all of those things. And I was able to pray and said, thank you for this day. Thank you for all that you've done for us. Thank you for, whatever that prayer was. But I knew that I was talking to God, and God knew that I was talking to him. And my father says, you're missing the fact that they chose you. If all they wanted was for someone to read something, they could have typed up something and actually wrote it out and told that person to read it. He goes, but it matters. It matters that it was you. It matters. God is using this moment. He's using this moment. He said, so step into it. So I stepped into that moment, and I allowed God to use me in that moment. And I was able to, one, some misconceptions fell off my mindset. And then two, it opened doors to people saying, hey, would you pray for me? Or just being that person that they knew they could trust to pray, to speak up and not be moved by the rules and the requirements, right? So I just want you to know, I just feel like it's important that I express that it matters. Everything about you matters. You are not on this earth by accident. And I often tell mothers, young mothers that are younger than me, or even some have been about my age and they've had children or not had planned to have children. And they're like, I made this mistake. Like, oh my God, like I'm ruining my life. And so not that they are not happy about it. It might feel like it's the wrong timing, or they might have believed a lie that they're not good enough to be a good mom. And so they think, oh my God, I've ruined my life, or I'm going to ruin this child's life. I didn't have a good example of, what parenthood was. And my response to them is always that no one sneaks in this universe on God. You might not have known that you were going to get pregnant. You might not have known that you would get pregnant from this guy that you thought was just like this dude. But God knew exactly who that child needed to be. He had ordained for their DNA to actually be part yours, part their father's. And he has a purpose and a plan for this child. And so literally no one sneaks in the universe on God. We did not sneak in the universe on God. He chose us before the foundation of the world. He chose us before he put us in our mother's womb. He said, before I knitted you in your mother's womb, I knew you. And he knows the plans that he has for us. So there was an appointed time for our life. There's an appointed time for our purpose. There's an appointed time for every single thing. So how do we tap into this appointed time, right? How do we know when it is? Well, that goes back to us cultivating a relationship with God. Literally cultivating. How do I cultivate it? Well, you give God time. I like to give God time in the morning. Lately, I've had some things that have happened, some different transitions, some different moves, some different doors opening, this whole rebranding of Minding What Matters and preparing these programs that God has given us, right? So my morning may not look like my morning looked like before. And not because I'm not giving God time or any of those things. Things have shifted and transitioned. So sometimes my time's at a different time. So instead of at 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning, it might be at 7:30. Or instead of at 7:30, it might be at 5:30. It just means that I had to adjust. So things might look different in this season to you as you say yes to God and you step out and you obey him. But know that it all matters. But we start at cultivating a relationship with God. Having that relationship with God is going to keep us focused, is going to keep us walking in the steps that he's ordered for us. That's the only way we know, is that we talk to the one who ordered them. We talk to the one who knit us together in our mother's womb, who knew us before he did that, who's called us according to his purpose and for his glory. The one who chose us to walk in the ministries and the businesses and all these other things that he's called us to walk into. God does not make mistakes, and he did not make a mistake with you. I often tell people, we have to either believe that God is God or that God is God. Meaning no other options, because I can't believe that God is perfect in all his ways except for when it comes to me. So anytime that there are thoughts that you don't matter, those are lies from the depths of hell. The enemy often speaks to us in first person. He's a spirit, but he is not God's equal. He couldn't be God's equal if he wanted to be. He just is not God's equal. So I want to encourage you today too to embrace that truth. So even though the enemy can speak to us in the first person and he uses things, or sometimes there's been strongholds set up in our minds so that even if the enemy is not present speaking to us, our mind has become accustomed to repeating bad habits of poor thoughts and how we process events. So it has become a part of us. So that's why we must renew our mind. We must restart. We must actually reincorporate or incorporate new habits and new beliefs and new understanding and revelation of the truth in the Word of God about who we are and who God is. Because honestly, everything that God does is to draw us closer to him, to cultivate a relationship with him, and to show us his character and to prove his faithfulness to us. I want you to know that you matter. What you think about matters. Who you give access to you matters. What you say yes and what you say no to matters. Because think about this. If I won't say no to the things I need to say no to, those things I should have said no to will be taking up the space that the things that God has ordained me to say yes to. So they won't be able to take place in the appointed time that God wants them to, or the time that he's appointed for you. And sometimes we are like, God, why is a certain thing taking so long? And this is not speaking to every single thing that takes long, because again, as I stated earlier, God will speak a thing to me and sometimes he'll pause it. But then in a season like this, he brings all the paused pieces together and shows me how all along he was forming this thing. But sometimes we think that God is waiting on us. We're waiting for God, but he's waiting for us to love ourselves enough, to trust him enough, to believe him enough, to let go of people and things and places that no longer suit who we are becoming and the person he's called us and created us to be. Sometimes no matter how much you love a person, how much you want the best for them, they don't want those same things. And so God has appointed a time for you to be doing a certain thing, to be in a certain place. And you getting there might mean you separating yourself from certain people, loving them from a distance and loving them enough to let them go, because you love yourself and you love God enough to walk in the calling and purpose that he has for you. So that's what I got for you guys this week. It's that it matters. And so I also want you guys to know that by, beginning next week, there are going to be some giveaways to celebrate the rebranding of Coaching by Vivian to Minding What Matters. But again, go over and visit us at mindingwhatmattersnow.com and just check it out. Give us your feedback, reach out, contact us, schedule a free consultation, or go ahead and schedule a session so that you can get your coaching started. Anyway, we look forward to hearing from you guys, and we just thank you guys for your support, for following the podcast. And also, you can look out for our second podcast, our new podcast entitled also Minding What Matters. That is scheduled to roll out near the end of September. So keep your eyes open, and make sure that you go over and subscribe to at Minding What Matters Now, so that you can be in the loop of all the really great things, from giveaways to information to our new blog, and just so much more that God has planned. So again, thank you guys for joining us on She Who Believes, the podcast. I am your host, Vivian Bell, and I am indeed she who believes. God bless you.